The clowning was relaxation for me. I enjoyed entertaining kids. Like some people are, you know, they unwind in different ways, either by going out drinking or that. I could put on clown makeup and I was relaxed, and I
How
enjoyed doing it. It was
it,
it was only twice a month that I did it.
yeah, this was not used then for a lure to draw kids to you as the
No, we would visit different hospitals and entertain the children there. And we didn't entertain them with handcuffs or anything like that. All we used was balloon animals and small toys and stuff like that. But we also did parades. And in the summertime, like on 4th of July, I used to be in 4 parades in one day. I've always told people when I got into clown makeup, I regressed into childhood. It was fun being a clown because you could be yourself, or just let yourself go and act a fool. You could be slapstick and funny and have a good time. That's why I always enjoyed clowning. Clowning has taken a bad name because of what they've used in my case.
For years, Chicago saw John Wayne Gacy as a hardworking contractor, a loyal Democrat precinct captain, and a charitable clown named Pogo who brought laughter to sick children in hospitals. But beneath the concrete of his suburban home lay a secret so vast and horrifying it would rewrite the history of American serial crime. This is the story of the man who proved that monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes, they organize your community block party. Hi, I'm Emily, and today we're going to talk about John Wayne Gacy. The label killer clown is so embedded in our culture that it's become almost a cartoon. But behind that painted smile was a real, calculating predator whose crimes expose terrifying flaws in how society sees, and fails to see, danger. This isn't just about the staggering number of victims. It's about the decades of pain for their families, the boys who were dismissed as runaways, and the chilling lesson that evil can wear the friendliest of faces. Let's look beyond the legend to the painful human truth. To understand the killer John Wayne Gacy became, we have to look at the boy he was. Born in Chicago on March 17, 1942, his world was shaped from the start by a single dominating force, his father, John Stanley Gacy Sr. The elder Gacy was a harsh, frustrated man, a World War I veteran and auto mechanic who drank heavily and channeled his anger directly at his only son. Young John was overweight, unathletic due to a heart condition, and more interested in reading or art than in the rough, masculine pursuits his father valued. This made him a constant target. The abuse wasn't just physical. It was a relentless psychological war. His father called him stupid, a sissy, and worthless, often while beating him. He openly favored Gacy's sisters, using them as examples to highlight his son's perceived failures. This created a deep, festering wound, a boy perpetually starving for approval from a man who seemed to offer only contempt. The impact was severe. Gacy began suffering from mysterious fainting spells in his teens. While doctors could never pinpoint a definitive physical cause, his father dismissed it all as weakness and attention-seeking, further isolating the boy. In a tragic twist, during his childhood, Gacy was also victimized by a family friend. These traumatic experiences, coupled with his home environment, likely warped his developing sense of self, relationships, and power. As a young adult, he desperately sought validation elsewhere. He dabbled in local Democratic politics in 1960, a move his father mocked. But Gacy was determined to build the picture-perfect life that would finally prove his worth. He moved to Springfield, Illinois, to manage a shoe company, and there he met Marlene Myers. They married in 1964. In a pivotal turn, his father-in-law gave him a golden opportunity: management of 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises in Waterloo, Iowa. Suddenly, Gacy was a respectable businessman, a married man, and soon, a father of 2, a son born in 1966, and a daughter in 1967. When his own dying father finally offered a begrudging apology, it seemed like Gacy had won. He had the family, the career, the American dream. But this impeccable facade concealed a devastating rot. Behind closed doors, Gacy was involved in hard drugs, underground swinging parties, and a secret life that put him in contact with vulnerable teenage boys. Using his authority as a boss and his money as a lure, he began engaging in deeply inappropriate and criminal conduct with these young men. This double life collapsed in 1968 when he was arrested and charged with a serious crime against a male minor. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. His wife immediately filed for divorce, taking everything: the house, the children, their shared life. The model citizen was exposed as a convicted felon, but this was just the end of Act 1. Prison wouldn't reform him. It would simply teach him how to build a better, more terrifying mask. Paroled after only 18 months for good behavior, Gacy returned to Chicago in 1970, a 30-year-old man forced to live with his mother under a strict curfew. He was determined to not just rebuild his life, but to cement an image so respectable that no one would ever look underneath it again. And so, he masterfully constructed 3 new public identities. First, he became a businessman. He founded PDM Contractors, a successful construction and remodeling company. He was known as a hard, sometimes temperamental boss, but one who got jobs done. Second, he became a civic pillar. Re-engaging with his political passion, he became a Democratic precinct captain for his Norwood Park Township neighborhood. He was the guy who got potholes filled, who organized local events, who knew the cops and politicians by name. This gave him credibility and connections. But his third identity was the most genius, and ultimately the most infamous: Pogo the Clown. Joining a local Jolly Joker clown club, Gacy threw himself into the role. He designed his own costumes, perfected his makeup, and became a regular performer at children's hospitals, charity fundraisers, and even street parties. Children loved him. Adults saw a man giving selflessly back to the community. This persona provided the ultimate cloak of harmless benevolence. Meanwhile, inside his unassuming single-story house at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue, he was building a chamber of horrors. His first murder is believed to have occurred in January 1972. The victim was a teenage boy he encountered. The method that would become his grim signature soon crystallized. Gacy's targets were almost always young men and boys between the ages of 14 and 21. Many were runaways, sex workers, or disconnected youths he found in Chicago's Greyhound bus station or troubled neighborhoods. He used his contracting business as a perfect lure, offering them day labor or the promise of a job. The process was chillingly systematic. He'd gain their trust, invite them to his home, often showing off his precinct captain badge to imply authority. Once there, he'd offer drinks or drugs. Then came the game. Gacy, a talented manipulator, would propose showing a magic trick with handcuffs. After demonstrating how to escape them, he'd convince the young man to try. Once the cuffs were on, the trick was revealed to be a lie. The key was hidden. The victim was trapped. What followed was a period of torture and violence. Gacy would sometimes don his clown costumes or other disguises during these attacks. Finally, he would murder them, most often by strangulation with a rope or board, a method he coldly called the rope trick.
Knots in general. Catch his sense of humor.
Shoelaces, huh? You're in trouble now.
Right.
Aren't you afraid sitting that close to me? What the hell? Oh, this is too long. Right, you don't need it this long. Okay. I had a rosary, which I carried in my pocket. I've always carried a rosary. It was my communion rosary. They said, well, what kind of a knot do you use? I said, what do you mean knot? When I tie things up? I says, depending on what I'm using it for, I said, the only thing I ever learned from Boy Scouts is a tourniquet knot. He said, well, show us what that is. So I took, at that time, and again, it's together, but in order to demonstrate it here, I took the rosary and I said, well, here, you put it around. This is hard trying to do this. Why don't you put your hand out? Okay, here. What I told him, I said, here, all you do is you wrap it around, you put one knot in it. And I said, then you put a second knot in it. Okay? Mm-hmm. I said, then you take a stick and stick it in here, and you just turn this. And I said, it causes a tourniquet. I said, that's the only knot I ever learned.
The body would then be stored temporarily under his bed or sofa. In the dead of night, he would bury them in the shallow, dirt floor crawl space that ran under his entire house. He later admitted that killing gave him a sense of ultimate power and control, a direct and horrifying inversion of the powerlessness he felt as a child. As the crawl space filled, he began simply throwing bodies into the Des Plaines River. For years, the smell emanating from his home was dismissed by neighbors and even police as a sewage problem. Gacy, the helpful contractor, would agree and promise to look into it. He was so brazen that he sometimes hired the siblings of his victims to work for him, even befriending grieving families. He attended police briefings about the missing young men he had murdered. The sheer, audacious normality of his outer life was his most effective weapon. It allowed him to murder at least 33 young men over 6 years in the heart of a busy suburb, without raising definitive alarm. The meticulously constructed world of John Wayne Gacy began to fracture on December 11, 1978. 15-year-old Robert Peast, a hardworking high school sophomore with an after-school job at a pharmacy, told his mother he was stepping outside to speak to a contractor about a potential construction job. That contractor was John Wayne Gacy. When Robert didn't return, his family contacted police immediately. This time, the victim wasn't marginalized or easily dismissed. He was a beloved kid from a stable, persistent family. Investigators quickly learned about Gacy from the pharmacy staff. A background check revealed his Iowa conviction. Almost immediately, the pieces began to click into a terrifying picture. Police placed Gacy under constant surveillance. During a preliminary search of his home and vehicle, officers found an arsenal of suspicious items: driver's licenses and personal effects of other missing young men, rolls of film depicting victims, handcuffs, police-style paraphernalia, and drugs. But the most compelling evidence was olfactory, the overwhelming, sickening odor that no sewage leak could explain. On December 22nd, with a full search warrant, the grim excavation began. News cameras broadcast the surreal scene to a horrified nation. In a quiet, snow-dusted Chicago suburb, police in hazmat suits were carefully digging up the earth beneath a neighbor's house. One by one, over days, they recovered 27 bodies from the crawl space. 2 more were found buried elsewhere on the property. The total would later rise to 33 when 4 additional victims were recovered from the Des Plaines River, places Gacy pointed out after his arrest. Gacy's confession was as cold as the December ground. He spoke of his victims with detachment, often referring to them as worthless or just items to be disposed of. His trial in 1980 was a media circus. His defense argued insanity, but prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence showing a man in full control. A man who kept meticulous business records while running a burial ground in his home. The jury took less than 2 hours to find him guilty of all 33 murders. The judge sentenced him to death, calling him an affront to humanity itself. He spent 14 years on death row, where he painted hundreds of disturbingly simplistic images, many of clowns, some of himself as Pogo. These paintings later became morbid collector's items. After all appeals were exhausted, he was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. His last meal was a bucket of KFC, and his final words were a crude, defiant sneer. "Kiss my ass." But the story didn't end with his death. For the families, the true horror was in the aftermath. Many of Gacy's victims came from unstable backgrounds. Some were never reported missing. To this day, 8 of the young men found under his house remain officially unidentified. John Does in a cemetery, their names lost. In an ongoing mission for closure, the Cook County Sheriff's Office has periodically exhumed these unknown remains for advanced DNA testing. As recently as 2021, this effort gave a name back to one victim, Francis Wayne Alexander, a man who had vanished in 1975. The work continues, a desperate race against time to reunite these lost sons with their identities before their living relatives pass away. Gacy's house was demolished in 1979, but the empty lot remains a silent, powerful testament. His legacy is a double-edged tragedy, the unimaginable loss of 33 young lives and the permanent poisoning of a symbol of joy. He turned the clown into an icon of fear. But more importantly, his case forces us to remember the vulnerable people society often overlooks. These weren't just numbers. They were someone's children. Their stories are the stark reminder that behind every sensational headline about a monster, there is a profound, enduring human cost. Researching this case, what haunts me isn't the clown or the killer. It's the quiet aftermath. It's the empty spaces in family photos that have never been filled, and the decades of wondering for parents who grew old without answers. Gacy's evil was in taking lives, but a subtler tragedy was in how the world failed to see those lives as important until it was far too late. It makes me wonder, who are we failing to see today? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm Emily. Thank you for watching this difficult, necessary deep dive. If it resonated with you, please like and subscribe. And always, take care of yourselves and look out for each other.